I think pretty much we're all here. It's good to see everybody. I see a lot of names that I know, a lot of entomologists and educators. I'm happy to be presenting from the Insect Sciences Museum, along with the Northern California Entomological Society and with the Parent Alliance. Darling, you're going to have to correct me. Um,
Concerned Parents Alliance. It's okay.
Concerned Parent Alliance. Yeah, we want our parents involved in the decisions that our young people are making. But we're happy to have with us Dr. Michelle Samuel-Foo, who is going to be presenting our Black History event this month, this year. And Michelle is the president-elect of the Southeastern branch of the Entomological Society of America. And for those of you who are educators, you may not know about the Entomological Society of America, but it is the organization that oversees everything insect-wise, spider-wise, myriapod-wise, anything entomological in the sciences. So I'm going to let Michelle introduce herself, and then she's going to take us into her presentation. And then afterwards, we're going to have a question and answer session.
Wonderful. So I'd like to begin by saying what an absolute honor it is to have been selected as a Black History Month honoree. I'm very grateful to the Insect Sciences Museum of California for this opportunity to speak about the topic of diversity in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and why I think that representation matters. For my talk this afternoon, I'm going to take you along my individual journey, navigating the world of academia, higher education, and the agriculture industry as a Black woman of Caribbean descent and a minority in a majority Caucasian or white profession. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing the central role they have played in the United States.
Honey, you don't want to hear this? She's from Alabama State University.
That's excitement. So I'm going to ask everybody who's not talking to please mute yourself. Thank you.
The story of Black History Month begins in 1915, half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. That September, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a Harvard-trained historian, and others, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, an organization dedicated to researching and promoting achievements by Black Americans and other peoples of African descent. Few could have imagined the impactfulness of African Americans to music, to art, to literature and science, and how it would shape our perceptions today. Every year since 1976, Black History Month has been recognized in America. This year's theme is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. The Black family has been reverenced, stereotyped, and vilified from the days of slavery to even now still. But with this topic, we have an opportunity to tackle and remove some of the negative stereotypes that might exist. When I think about individuals that have personally inspired me as a person of color, there's a long list that comes to mind, but former First Lady Michelle Obama rises to the top of the list for me, partly because of her charisma, her influence, and her compassionate leadership. To me, she embodies an example of all-round excellence. Michelle is quoted as saying that history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. And it is with this as a backdrop that I'm going to move into sharing a bit of my own journey and how my experiences have shaped me into the individual that I am today. So I grew up on the tiny Caribbean island of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad is the last in the archipelago of all the Caribbean islands, lying just about 11 kilometers from Venezuela at the tip there of South America. We are a twin island republic, but one nation with a population of about 1.4 million people. The ethnic and religious diversity of Trinidad and Tobago is strongly reflected in our culinary and our musical traditions. The island is well known for a number of things, including its carnival, arguably the greatest show on earth. Carnival is an annual celebration of our culture and our history, with revelers in beautiful costumes playing mass, listening to soca music, steel pans, and enjoying our local cuisine, which combines West African, Indian, Chinese, and other elements to create a distinctively Trinidadian fare. If you've ever visited the island, then you know what is pictured here. This is a doubles. This is one of our staple breakfast foods that anyone that visited the island must try and is familiar with. It's delicious. If you're interested in beaches, you'll find swaying palms, white sands, and gentle rolling waves on several of the coasts of the island, including Maracas and Las Cuevas. Trinidad and Tobago has long stood out in the Caribbean as it is rich in oil and asphalt. We have one of the world's largest asphalt deposits in South Trinidad, which is known as La Brea. And we are also abundant in natural gas, and we remain one of the world's largest exporters of methanol. I grew up as part of a blended family in San Grande, Trinidad, which is in the northeastern part of the island. My dad, Winston, married my mom, Radhika, who had 2 boys previously of her own, my brothers Shami and Ricardo. And together they had 5 children of their own, my siblings Nicole, Fonda, Timmy, and Phoebe. So in total, we were a family of 9, and I am smack in the middle of the brood. So there's a similarity that I always point out to people that know me well, and it's one that exists between Vice President Kamala Harris and myself. My dad is of Negro descent, so he's Black, and my mom is East Indian, making my siblings and I hybrids. It's a term that we use in plant breeding or in agronomy. And what that means is that we are a mixed genotype and phenotype, which is affectionately known as Dogla in Trinidad. So I'm going to talk to you about what life was like growing up for me in the islands and how I journeyed from living in Trinidad and Tobago to coming to the United States. Our house was a simple 2-bedroom wooden structure with no indoor plumbing for a bathroom for many years. We did have running water, and much later a 3rd bedroom was added. And as you can imagine, my family didn't have much in terms of resources or material possessions or anything extra. This had the advantage, if I can say, of us being great recyclers, and we were excellent at repurposing. By current standards, I've come to realize that I was actually poor when I was growing up. But the incredible thing is, when I lived in Trinidad, I never felt that way. Certainly, I knew that I had less than my peers did. There were no family vacations. We didn't have a car. And if we had a treat of fried chicken from the local Royal Castle, which is like the equivalent of Kentucky Fried Chicken, those 2 boxes had to be shared equally amongst everyone in the house. And this is a skill that I take with me even today with my own family. We share everything. I remember having just 1 pair of socks sometimes when I was in high school that I would turn inside out if it got too soiled. But what I remember most about my childhood is that I didn't have my textbooks when I was in elementary school, and not even when I was in high school, when I really needed them for studying. So this meant that I had to pay really good attention in class, and I had to be extra creative when it came time to doing my homework. I would often walk to my friend's house, Mira or Narissa, that lived about maybe within 2 miles of my own home. And I would walk to their house and write down the questions that were assigned that day so that I could come home and work on them. Growing up in Trinidad, sometimes the electricity would be cut unexpectedly. And this meant that I would have to move outside to these concrete steps that you see here to get my homework completed. Or I could do it via candlelight. But I didn't think anything of it. It's just the way things were, and I did what I had to do because there was no way that I was going to show up to school the next day with my homework not being completed. I loved school. I really loved my high school, and my teachers, while I was a student at Northeastern College, they had such a positive influence on my life and the person that I am today. I felt as though they took such a strong interest in me while I was a student, you know, just 11 years old starting high school. And this really influenced the direction that my life took. The friends that I had in high school also played a huge part in my success. We really motivated each other. So if my best friend at the time, Larissa, got a 97 in trigonometry, I was right there neck to neck with her with a 96.5 right behind her. And our competition amongst ourselves spurred me to continuously improve and strive for excellence. And so I make it a point today to get to know the friends that my own children have, because I know and I recognize what an important influence your friends can be, whether you're a young person or even if you're a seasoned adult. Here's a photo of my late father, Winston. He was known as Mr. Tim to just about everyone on our street, Baker Trace. He's also pictured here with my grandmother and my uncle. Both of my parents passed away quite young. My dad died when I was finishing high school in Trinidad, and my mom passed away just after I finished undergraduate studies in the US. My dad had only a third grade education himself, but he believed in gaining an education, and he made sure that all seven of his children attended secondary school. I'm not sure that he knew what university was, and he was gone before we had the chance to have conversations about things like this. But I have a few distinct memories of him that stand out for me. I remember that he had a solid work ethic, and every morning before we left for school, he was at Mr. Surge's sawmill where he worked as a day laborer. And being able to earn a decent living to support our family of 9 was very important to him. My parents were also subsistence farmers, and we practiced slash and burn agriculture. And this is where I got my initial introduction into growing and cultivation and insects. The vegetables that we grew, we sold at the local market on Saturdays. You know, my dad never said the words, "I love you," to me as a child, but I knew that he did without a doubt. He more than anyone else, really believed in my potential, and perhaps he saw that I had a determination that made me a little bit of an anomaly in my family. When my brothers would be outside playing basketball or football, soccer, I would be inside, you know, doing homework or reading a book, reading whatever it is I could get my hands on, whether that was reading the newspaper or reading the label on the detergent box or the cereal box. I read whatever I could find. There was this time that I was in sixth form in Northeastern College in high school, and I wanted to enter a public speaking competition that was being sponsored by the forestry division. But I was worried that I couldn't match up to the other competitors. I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a typewriter, we didn't have a set of Encyclopedia Britannica. The internet wasn't a thing back then. There were no YouTube videos that I could watch for guidance. It was going to be a tough sell. But when I was having one of these conversations with my father, and I told him about how I was scared that I was at such a disadvantage, he said, "Michelle, you're capable of anything." And with his words as my guidance, I spent every free moment that I had in our local library pouring through newspapers to get facts, using the encyclopedias that were there, interviewing my teachers, just to gain the information to write my debate speech. And on the day of the competition, I surprised even myself when I was able to beat out the competitors from the more prestigious high schools in Northeastern, and I was able to bring the trophy home to my school that day. And that's one of the greatest memories that I have from high school. My journey to the United States is an interesting one. I came to this great country in 1998 as an international student on an F1 visa to attend Burton Parker College on an academic scholarship. I had taken the SATs 2 years after I had graduated high school, when a friend of mine had mentioned that there was an exam that you could take to win a scholarship to study in the US, and that's exactly what I did. So I learned about the exam in the fall of 1997. I borrowed books from the US Consulate Library to learn about the format of the test, and I took the exam that November, found out my score in December. It was good enough that I scored a scholarship, and then I applied for my passport, and by March of 1998, so within a short couple of months, I was on my way to the United States for the very first time. My father had already passed by this time, and I don't think that my mother thought that I was actually going to leave home until I showed her the airplane ticket that I had. But I was determined. I was 21 years old and making decisions, minus guidance of family members, minus connections, just remembering my dad saying that, Michelle, you're capable. This photograph is, it was taken on the day that I was leaving Trinidad to go study in the United States. I had a tremendous send-off. This is me in the middle in the white shirt, and you can see this broad smile that's on my face. I was so excited and so happy. I had no idea what was awaiting me when I came to the United States. And while the rest of my family, you can't see it here, but there were a lot of tears shed that day. My mom was worried that I didn't have any family expecting me to hold my hand, you know, to take me in. I didn't even have a suitcase, but I remember boarding that plane full of energy and heading to the United States for the first time, ready to conquer the world. God had put some amazing people on my life and on my journey that I was to have, and I really met some great people that took me in and that influenced my academic career. Here's a fun story though. I was expecting the bright lights and the skyscrapers of New York City when I thought that I was coming to the United States. So back in Trinidad, the image that I had as a child growing up is that the United States was all completely developed and that in every corner of every state, there were skyscrapers. The reality for me as a student coming to South Georgia was that I moved to a town where there was only about 2,400 people. There wasn't even public transportation. You had to make friends with students that had cars or wait on the school van that would take international students once a week to do their shopping in Vidalia, Georgia, or walk to the local Family Dollar store. You could easily spot international students at Britton Parker College as they would always be walking with several bags in tow to their dorm rooms. The good thing about attending a small school is that I was able to concentrate on my studies. And as a result of this, I was able to complete my bachelor's degree and I graduated summa cum laude in just over 2.5 years. All I did was go to school and take classes. I was afraid that my scholarship would run out, and this was the added motivation that I needed to work arduously and incessantly. Some semesters I took between 6 to 8 classes. And when I did eventually receive permission to work, because as an international student, you were prohibited from working unless you had special permission from the USCIS, I got a job at the local video store. I think it was called Video Warehouse at that time. And I worked at nights and on weekends, and I sure was glad to be able to earn a little bit of money. I majored in biology as this was easy for me. I have to give kudos to my professors at BPC, Dr. Saeed, Dr. George, Dr. Boyd, and Dr. McMillan. They were just outstanding individuals. I do remember thinking that a lot of the work was like revision for me because of the foundation that I received as a high school student in Trinidad had really, really well prepared me for college in the US. In terms of minority mentors, I had no African-American professors while I was an undergraduate student. My classes were not very diverse. Remember, I was a student in rural South Georgia at this time. And while I was not used to seeing faces that didn't look like mine, I made this an absolute non-issue for me, and I didn't allow it to discourage me in any way. As a senior approaching graduation, I had no idea what my next step would be. I didn't know what graduate school was. Remember, I was navigating all of this as a foreign student without family guidance, and I didn't know anyone personally that had graduated from college in the US, and with few resources of my own, I thought that once I earned my bachelor's degree that I was all set. As fate would have it, Dr. McMillan, who was the new chair of the biology department when I was in my final semester at Bruton Parker College, he took an interest in me. And as I was taking his population biology class, I remember handing him my final. And while the other students were still taking their exam, he asked me, he said, Michelle, so what are your plans when you're finished with, when you graduate, when you're finished with your schooling? And I told him that I didn't have any immediate plans. And he was the one that mentioned to me that I should consider graduate school. This was the first time that I was hearing this term. I didn't know what it meant to earn a master's degree or to earn a doctorate degree. Dr. McMillan actually arranged for me to visit a colleague of his at the University of Georgia that was looking for a student to join his plant breeding program. I went up to visit Dr. Jerry Johnson in Griffin, Georgia, not realizing that I was on a formal interview. And at the end of it, Jerry insisted that I apply for the MS program at the University of Georgia, and I did just that. He instructed me that I needed to take the GRE exam, which is the graduate school entrance exam, and I did exactly what he said, and they admitted me, and I spent the next 8 years of my life at the University of Georgia. I completed my master's degree with Dr. Johnson and then moved into my PhD with Drs. John All and Roger Borma. After I had taken my first entomology course with Dr. All, I knew that beyond a shadow of a doubt, I loved entomology and this is what I wanted to study. But these three gentlemen, these three individuals pictured here had such a positive influence on my life that I can't even explain how indebted I am to them. They oversaw my academic work and they provided me with so many opportunities for networking and scientific exposure and just overall development as a young person and a young professional. It's under their tutelage that I learned and developed my love for academia. I seized every opportunity to attend academic conferences, workshops, and scientific meetings. Again, my mentors, they were just outstanding individuals. They never treated me any differently. And I worked just as hard as every other student in the lab. I know now that I was very fortunate to have such excellent mentors when I read about the experiences of others that were not nearly as positive as mine. I feel as though they opened doors for me that otherwise would not have been opened, and I am forever indebted to them for this. When I reflect on my time in graduate school, I don't recall seeing many Black and brown faces in any of my classes while I was a student at UGA. In fact, it was not uncommon for me to be the only person in the room that looked like me. I think I was the only African American in my master's program at UGA Griffin, and I was one of 2 Black females in entomology at UGA in the early 2000s. Alani was a master's student at the time that I was doing my PhD, and we took many of the same classes, so I had a built-in study buddy in her. I was so focused and grateful for the opportunity to earn graduate degrees, and this was reflected in my efforts, my attitude, and my outlook. Both of my professors offered me graduate teaching or research assistantships, which is how I financed my graduate education. And for the students or parents that are on the line, a GTA or a GRA is a paid position in graduate school where in exchange for your tuition and a small monthly stipend, you have to teach classes or work in a research lab. And I was very happy to do either, and I dedicated myself to these roles. I used the fact that I stood out in my classes to my advantage to make myself known to my professors, whether I was taking a soil fertility class or with Dr. Van Etel, who was in horticulture, or a plant biotechnology class with Dr. Borma. When I was taking Dr. Borma's class, I remember studying nonstop for a solid 2 weeks for his final exam. And I scored 100 on that paper. The TA at the time, she checked my paper twice. She couldn't believe it. Dr. Borma said no student had ever scored 100 on his final before. And I did it. I was so determined to do well. So anyway, here's a summary of my academic journey. So I went to Burton Parker College in 1998. Then I moved on to the University of Georgia, where I spent 8 years in graduate school. This is a picture of me on my actual graduation day. This is Dr. All, just after he had hooded me for my PhD. And when I left graduate school, I joined the Gator Nation. I left graduate school and I accepted a position at the University of Florida as the IR4 regional coordinator, where I was thrust into a leadership role that saw me have responsibility for 13 states plus the territory of Puerto Rico. I was charged with representing the interests of specialty crop stakeholders in my region that had direct implications for the agriculture sector. So specialty crops make up about 40% of the total value of all the US crop production in the United States. They are high value, low acreage crops. And due to the lack of crop protection products on specialty crops and minor uses on major crops, there's a gap that exists. And the research that's needed to fill this gap is performed by the IR4 project. In these photos here, I am at various workshops or as part of IR4 assisting with GLP residue field trials at one of the 5 research sites across the southeastern United States and Puerto Rico. While my formal education had prepared me for the technical aspects of my job, the technicalities I needed to be successful in my role, my wit, my personality, and my confidence had to make up for the deficiencies that graduate school did not prepare me for. I had to be confident when I asked for a meeting with the president of the Strawberry Growers Association of Florida, or when I was attending the Florida Citrus Mutual annual meeting for the first time, or if I was invited to be a part of the Southeastern Vegetable Extension Workers Group, or the Southern IPM Center, knowing that I had to prove myself as number 1, a young PhD fresh out of graduate school, number 2, as a woman, number 3, as a minority, and number 4, as a foreigner. As I reflect on my nearly 10-year career with the IR4 program, I can say that there were not many faces like mine that I encountered. Were there any uncomfortable moments? Sure, there were a few, but I didn't focus on this at all. Life is bound to throw you a few curveballs no matter what you do in life. I think that in the end, what matters is how you respond to challenges and what you learn from the experience of it. I had a very rewarding job, and it gave me a lot of exposure professionally, and I was determined to excel to the best of my ability. I do remember being intimidated during my first year in the job, though, because there was so much to know, from entomology to plant pathology to weed science to GLP regulations to field residue trials to personnel management to SOPs to EPA inspections. It was a lot for me as a young graduate, but I was determined to live up to the task. This photo here is from one of my EPA inspections at my field site in Puerto Rico, and I'm happy to say that we passed with no exceptions. When you get a notice from the Environmental Protection Agency saying that they're coming to inspect the research that you're doing, it causes you to immediately pause with fear, because if you cut any corners or done anything that's against the regulations, rest assured the EPA inspector is going to uncover it. But we didn't do that at all. The person that held the position prior to my tenure at the University of Florida had been on the job even before I was born. Those were huge shoes for me to fill. In fact, I heard those words so many times my first year that it became a refrain, and I used this to help motivate me. I worked incessantly to try to learn everything that I could. I was uncertain that I wanted to be in the spotlight. And I didn't understand at the time that this was a de facto role of the position that I had accepted. But again, remembering the encouraging words of my dad that said, "Michelle, you're capable," I was determined to do well. And by the time the annual workshop came around, the second or the third time, I was able to clearly advocate for the needs in my region without hesitation. The experience that I gained at IR4 made me into a stronger individual. I examine every aspect of my life now as though it's a GLP field residue trial. And what that means is that I look at everything that I'm tasked with doing with a very fine-tooth comb, whether it's in my personal life or my professional life or my dealings with my children. I document everything and I try to leave no loopholes open. And this habit of being detailed has helped me to be successful in my career as an entomologist. There are a few individuals that made my tenure at IR4 particularly memorable, and I'd like to mention just 3 individuals here. Kathleen Knight, who's pictured here, was our regional quality assurance coordinator. And Kathleen, from the very first day that I started at IR4, she really took me under her wing, and she was my informal mentor. And every question that I had, she would always stop whatever she was doing and she would answer the questions. She would explain context, explain calculations, explain how an inspection was done. Kathleen was my knight in shining armor on my first year on the job, and she remained in that role throughout my career at IR4. Dr. Marty Marshall, who was my direct supervisor, Marty was a true champion of mine. I needed his help as I was navigating immigration regulations and trying to transition from being a foreign student to having a work visa and eventually gaining permanent residence in the US, which is an arduous process. And everything that I asked of him, he was very supportive and he made happen for me. And without his support, I wouldn't have navigated my early career. And so I am eternally grateful for his support. Becky Sisko, who was my counterpart at the Western Region IR4. She is also in California. She's probably a familiar name to many of you in California. Becky was my horizontal counterpart. I was the Southern Region coordinator and she was the Western Region coordinator. And she really thought that I was something special. She believed, sometimes we would have these side conversations after the food use workshop because we would be going neck to neck, trying to get priorities for our separate regions. Sometimes the priorities weren't always the same. Tropical fruits were really important to me. They were important to her sometimes on a lesser scale, but we tried to coordinate. But at the end of it, I always felt as though she was a mentor to me also, ensuring that as the new person on the job, as the new regional coordinator, that I understood my role and what an important one it was. Oftentimes at our annual food use workshop, and here's a picture of what this meeting would look like, there would be sometimes 300 to 400 people in the room, stakeholders making decisions about pest problems that ultimately influenced federal funding. And sometimes I would be just one of a single handful of African Americans or minorities in this room. And minority voices were noticeably absent, and I'm not sure what the reason for this was. Okay, so not many faces like mine when I was an undergraduate, nor in graduate school, nor during my 10-year career with the University of Florida and IR4. We're starting to see a little bit of a theme emerge here. While at IR4, although it was not a part of my formal duties, I remain involved with outreach and extension, volunteering to teach guest lectures and classes, to help put on workshops for insect IDs, working with student groups, because I really enjoyed these things and they brought me added joy and fulfillment. I actually always loved this particular part of entomology. Fast forward to the present, and in 2018, I left my career at the University of Florida to take a position in academia at Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama, where I currently work today. Alabama State University is an HBCU, so it's a historically Black college and university with a student population of about 5,000. At ASU, I have the opportunity to use my position to inspire the next generation of scientists and STEM professionals, especially minority students. I feel like I have the opportunity to change the narrative around the types of faces that are expected in agriculture, in STEM, and in academia, in science policy, and in decision making. I love working with my ASU students. I find them interesting, and when I have the chance to make a connection with them one-on-one, I really take advantage of it. My students often come to my office to visit, even after their class with me is over. Many of them stop by just to chat or check in, and I especially love this part of my job. I wanted to share this teaching evaluation, one of my teaching evaluations, the recent one that I had, and notice this particular part here. The student said, "I enjoy the teacher, but the tests are pretty hard." I think we don't see enough pictures like these in the media of our young people. We need to change this. I would often call my students up to work on the boards to check for understanding, to make sure that they understood the concepts. And these would be burly football players or track athletes or basketball players. And sure enough, with a little cajoling, they would come up and, give the answer. And if they didn't know the answer, it was not, there was no embarrassment in my class. It was actually an opportunity for the others that may have better understood the point that I was trying to make to help everyone get acclimated. I think it's really important for young people to see African Americans and minorities in a variety of professional settings and in positive roles. I feel that representation absolutely matters. And why? For the very simple reason that it's hard to be what you don't see portrayed. According to the National Science Foundation, underrepresented minorities vary in their presence across science and engineering fields. The STEM workforce is 89% white and 72% male. Right now in the US, there are currently more non-white children than white children, and nearly half of all children born are female. STEM fields do not currently reflect the diversity of our country. Again, there's undeniable power in representation. We need to showcase to our young, impressionable minds that there are many careers in STEM available to them. I take entomology with me wherever I go. I've been to my first son's class ever since he was in preschool, and I do the same with now my youngest, who is a 4th grader at Halcyon Elementary here in Montgomery, Alabama. I love entomology, and I love the way the young people's faces light up whenever they see a grasshopper or a praying mantis with its wings outspread. Sometimes they're scared, sometimes they're so excited. I get a plethora of reactions. So I'm going to showcase some of the activities that I've had the chance to be involved with since joining Alabama State University. One of my first initiatives was to establish an urban teaching garden on campus. So African Americans are disproportionately affected by obesity. Among non-Hispanic Blacks aged 20 and older, 63% of men are overweight or obese, and 77% of women are overweight. We know that food choices play a role in the risk factor for obesity. This initiative was born out of the idea that we want to change the food narrative, the narrative around food choices, so that with this garden on campus, we can introduce minority students to specialty crops and sustainable agriculture at a non-land grant HBCU. In my lab, I encourage students to present their research at different, to present their research at different conferences. If you volunteered in my lab or volunteered at the gardens, I encourage our students to present at local research symposium or at the regional branch of the Entomological Society of America. The Asu Teaching Garden, we've developed a social media following. Please follow us on Instagram or on Facebook. And here we get to highlight what's growing. We share opportunities for community engagement and volunteer work. STEM Saturdays is an opportunity for us to showcase entomology to our neighborhood K through 12 kids. Some of these kids have never even heard the term entomology. Some of them are so scared of every single insect, but by the time we leave, this is my son's Noah's face here. By the time we leave, they're all super excited, and sometimes they even want to take some of the insects home with them. I also take part in outreach and extension, and encourage our students to take part in service learning within the local community. These are students of mine that have volunteered at Eat South, which is a local urban teaching garden here in Montgomery, Alabama. This is a picture from the first ever specialty crops workshop that was held at Alabama State. We had over 300 participants come through that particular day. I had a lot of help to put on this workshop. This is a nutritionist that we had invited. We had cooperatives from Alabama Cooperative Extension, from Auburn University. A lot of people just really excited to be on campus at Alabama State to help promote agriculture and entomology. I talked about outreach and extension. This is outreach and extension that I did in 2019 in collaboration with my colleagues from the University of Florida and University of Georgia. I really love working in extension. One thing that I'm actually the most proud of since being at Alabama State is the ASU Industrial Hemp Research Program that I've started and that I'm now charged with leading on campus. Through this initiative, we're able to introduce students to working with sustainable agriculture and working with this cannabis sativa cultivar. And in this picture here, this is my master student Kathleen Knight doing an insect survey of industrial hemp that's grown in high tunnels in Alabama. We work also with local farmers, also helping them with their hemp production. We collaborate because Alabama State is not a land grant university. We have to collaborate with other universities, and this is us here working with cooperators at Tuskegee University. At ASU, I've also been able to develop what's known as what we are calling fondly a greenhouse complex on campus. And here is where we have, the administration has been tremendously supportive. With a little more than ½ acre of land, we were able to build a modern day greenhouse, 2 high tunnels, and the teaching garden. And this is a point of pride, I think, and a new addition of a brand new discipline to Alabama State University. This is the ASU greenhouse complex that I was just mentioning. We're doing a lot of collaboration with other HBCUs in the state. HBCU Cares is an initiative between Alabama State, Alabama A&M, and Tuskegee University surrounding hemp cultivation. So I hope that this presentation has highlighted that no matter where you are, you have the opportunity to make an impact and positively influence those around you. Oftentimes, our voices are absent, but I firmly believe that we need to place some overdue spotlight on those that are underrepresented individuals that are doing good work. There are 2 groups within the National Entomological Society of America that, in my opinion, are trailblazers for doing just this, recognizing and contributing to the good work that people of color and underrepresented groups are doing to help advance our science and make it welcoming to everyone. Entomologists of Color is very active on social media, and next week we will be having a week-long series of events to showcase being Black in entomology. Also, the International Association of Black Entomologists, a group that I've been a member of for more than a decade now, is dedicated to encouraging Black and minority entomologists. And the group provides scholarships and mentoring to young scientists. And in 2015, we authored a publication that was the first of its kind, a memoir on the unique paths to success and successful and fulfilling careers in entomology. I feel as though I've been fortunate to take advantage of opportunities throughout my career, and I've received some accolades. One of the most important accolades that I received was in 2020. I was honored with the Entomological Society of America's Founders Memorial Award. I am the first Black woman to have ever received this honor. The Founders Memorial Award is one of the highest honors given by the Entomological Society of America, and it's given to an entomologist with outstanding credentials, and that person is selected to give a keynote lecture during our annual meeting. Rob Morrison, a member of ESA's newly formed committee on canvassing for awards and honors, he had written an article that heavily influenced my decision to seek the Founders Memorial Award. Rob had wrote that it will take sustained efforts from those both with privilege in the research enterprise and those who are underrepresented themselves to collectively overcome entrenched biases that lead to disparity in the recognition of accomplishments within our diverse profession. A couple weeks ago, I received an email from a graduate student at the University of Tennessee that erased any doubt in my mind that the work that I am doing is meaningful and impactful. Julian wrote to me and he said, as an African-American student in agriculture and in the entomology industry, I find it incredibly hopeful to see torchbearers as yourself paving a way for Black students in the natural sciences. I'd like to end by saying that representation matters because we all bring different perspectives to the table, and those perspectives are informed by our experiences and our identities. We bring differing perspectives to the table, and those factors inform who we are and how we think. We need to have our own voices heard and have our perspectives factored into decision making. To do otherwise is to risk continuous development of policies that ignore us to our own detriment. Again, there is undeniable power in representation. This year's social justice movement that we all bore witness to exemplifies the need for us to level the playing field because our voices matter too. I'll end by saying that today, more than ever, we have an obligation to honor and make a genuine effort to include broad representation when we think of entomology and STEM. Let's ask ourselves, why is it important to have diversity among those who study diversity in the case of entomology? A recent American entomologist article that was authored by a group of talented entomologists that I had the privilege to work with recently had this to say. Why should we care if entomology is not diverse? There are a number of reasons, but I'll point out that a lack of diversity limits our science and it limits inclusivity in our scientific community, and it further marginalizes entomologists from already marginalized groups, as the very best expertise comes in many different backgrounds and via many different pathways to science. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't end my talk without acknowledging my family. They are my absolute greatest accomplishment, and them being proud of me matters so much. They offer me continuous and unparalleled love, sometimes slight headaches too. I had my first son, Johan, pictured here when and Johan is actually college bound himself. We're waiting to make college decisions. He's going to be college bound this fall, and I'm so excited and sad at the same time. I had Johan when I was a master's student. I had his brother Oliver while I was a PhD student, and my youngest Noah when I was during my first year at the University of Florida. My sister Phoebe pictured here, and she's also stateside. She lives in the United States. The rest of my siblings are back in Trinidad. My youngest brother Timmy actually just came to the United States to attend college, so he'll be the second person in my family to earn a degree. And all my nieces, they are a continuous ray of sunshine in my life, and I am grateful for them. Every experience is better with them. We call ourselves the Foo Fighters, us, them, and I love them. And I want to say to remember to have some fun too while you're working and developing your professional career. I go to the gym 5 days a week, and I do a combination of weightlifting and cardio, and it's the way that I start every work day, and it just gets me ready to conquer any problem that might come my way. This is a picture of me at Carnival in Trinidad, just completely enjoying the revelry that is uniquely and distinctly Trinidadian. And with that, I'd like to say thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That was awesome. Okay, thank you, Michelle. You have a really rich background, and your trajectory is just going up, and all the things that you accomplished. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
They're really inspirational. Some of the takeaways I got is that a lot of the way your career started was self-motivated. You had to have it within yourself to to start to do the things that you did. But I have a question there. There's going to be a lot of people, a lot of entomologists around you that are jealous. And they're going to be jealous because they've been doing bugs since they were 4. And you didn't see entomology as a career when you were young?
No, I didn't know that you could be an entomologist.
Okay.
I didn't know that you could go to school to study insects. But
Yeah.
once I learned that you could, I grabbed a hold of that because I loved it and I enjoy it so much.
And then another thing I saw was that your family is really important in your path, and then your teachers. What was shocking to me is that you didn't have any faculty, any black faculty, anywhere in your education, yet you persevered. But it wasn't just because of your own perseverance. There were progressive people around you.
Absolutely.
And so what I want to leave for some of us who may not know this experience, and a lot of us don't, those of us who are not minorities, I want to say to you to recognize the power that you have to make a difference. And now I'm going to open it up to our co-hosts, Darlene Griffin first with the Concerned Parent Alliance, if you have any questions.
Hi, well, thank you so much. You know what? I have to say, Dr. Michelle, you are awesome.
Thank you.
Very, very impressive. I mean, just amazing, your story. And I hope that you are documenting it all and putting it in a book.
Yes.
Because more and more young folks need to be inspired by your message. And I'm certain it was not easy for you. I think I have 2 questions. One mainly a comment, and then maybe a second one a question. I mentioned before we went live that I have a little cousin, Alexis Cleveland, that is here. We call her Allie, and she's actually watching live.
Right.
She just started at your university, and I texted her. I said, "You gotta get on live. You gotta get on live." What message would you give to Allie? Because just even the other day, she sent a text message saying, "Oh, you guys, please pray for me. This is harder than I thought." We're like, "Don't you give up. You can do this." So what message would you have for Allie? And then I have a second question.
To Allie, well, first of all, she should stop by so we can talk one-on-one. Allie, I'm in the Life Sciences building on the 3rd floor. Come on in over anytime. Allie, be very careful with the friends that you choose. Make sure they're like-minded individuals that also value education. You can value having fun. I think having a balance is really important, but you have to get your assignments completed. You have to show up for class, whether it's online or in person. You have to get all your assignments completed. Really take your education very seriously and don't put things off that you can take care of immediately.
That is advice. That's really good advice.
Thank you for the advice, and I will definitely take it into consideration. Actually, I'll definitely do it. Let me say that.
Hey, Allie, good, very good.
Hey guys.
You're welcome, Allie. All right, I'm sure she will follow through. She's very good at that. And then my second comment or question to you is, as I'm going to piggyback off of what Eddie asked you. I can see, you come from a loving family. We have very similar backgrounds. I'm a first in my family too of a lot of things, just like you are. But I was surrounded around a Black community, and not only Blacks, but a variety of folks. Because Eddie and I had a mentor that was Japanese, who was just an amazing woman that just passed, Messiah Nakamura. But mainly Black folks that surrounded us. And in your pictures, we could see that, as Eddie stated, you didn't have a lot of Black folks around you except for your family. So I'm sure you went through what is called microaggressions and maybe even some blatant racial experiences. And I'm talking, I just wrote this book called Revealed, and it talks about microaggressions versus blatant racial experiences. But can you talk about what that meant to you and how you were able to overcome that regardless of the situation? You still rose above it all?
I remember when I was a student at the University of Georgia, and we had taken a trip to an insect collecting trip to Sapelo Island. And it was during that time, because it was an overnight trip, that was one of the times that I experienced my first sense of not actually belonging, because when we had to choose roommates, people that were like chose each other, and I found myself alone. That was a little discouraging for me. And I had several experiences like this, not just in graduate school, but when I worked also during my first job outside of graduate school, where sometimes, you know, you're not sure if what you're feeling is what you're feeling, if what your experiences is what you're feeling, and you're not sure who to talk about it with. And it's not just racially motivated. Sometimes it's because you're a female. It's a lot of different reasons that you are being centered out. And I always just came back to the reason that, you know, why I was in school and why I had opportunities being given to me is because I was capable. And I never put in my mind that I had a mindset of feeling sorry for myself or thinking that I wasn't good enough. I always felt that I was capable and that I belonged, and I let my work speak for itself. But it's a tough situation to deal with.
Well, I applaud you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So we also have one of our co-hosts, the Pacific Coast Entomological Society, and there are I see at least 3 people from that group here. If you could just by maybe a reaction or a show of hands or who's in PCS? I see Sue, I see Ken Schneider, I see Kathy, and I know Candace is in there somewhere, but is there
I think Candace is still here, although she has to log off very soon.
Yeah, but if we could get you to go next with questions, any one of you.
All right, well, I'd like to start, and thank you, Michelle, for such great and enthusiastic learning about entomology. I'm fascinated by your life story, and my biggest question as an entomologist, of course, I'm the managing secretary of Pacific Coast Entomological Society, and we're one of the co-hosts of this meeting, and we're a professional and amateur organization, but okay, not as expensive as ESA. I mean, in fact, you can encourage your students. We actually have a student rate of $12 a year, and they 4 journals. Not a bad deal.
That's a wonderful deal.
and not only that, but you know, if you're a member, the page charges are like very, very reasonable. So think about it if they want to publish.
Absolutely.
Anyway. But thank you again. My biggest, of course, burning question is, because you talk more about the plants, etc. What's your favorite insect order?
I think that has to be the Lepidoptera. Everybody loves the butterflies and the moths. And now with my work with industrial hemp, we see a lot of Lepidopteran pests, the corn earworm in particular, and that's one that I've always remained interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then also, I love the way you seem to have recruited. You talk to young people too. We're going to try to do that. We're even trying to reach out and give honorary memberships to students. So do encourage your students to think about joining us.
Absolutely. I definitely will.
And so just a fascinating presentation. I love all the information you gave us. Thank you again.
Yeah. Anybody else from Pacific Coast Entomological Society?
There was a question in the chat. People were asking if you could please repeat the addresses for your social media pages.
Okay, I'll actually type it in the chat. It's at Asu Teaching Garden. And if you are on Twitter, you could follow me. I'm at MichelleSam13. Or at Michelle Samuel-Foo on Instagram.
Eddie, I believe Lynn Samuels has her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead. Lynn Samuel. Lynn going once, twice. Okay, let's go to another person who happened to join us. He's from the Black Naturalist group and also is a leader with Outdoor Afro. Anybody heard of Outdoor Afro? Raise your hand. It's a group that gets African Americans outdoors. So I'm gonna let Clay talk about his group and just really quickly, and then if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those questions.
Thanks, Eddie. Thank you, Michelle. Fantastic. I applaud you. Lots of wonderful work. I hope you continue. And Outdoor Afro, I was a leader for them for about 4 or 5 years. No longer with the group, but they're still in connection with them. And they are getting Black folks, people of color, out into nature. And that's the biggest issue is we have a lot of myth and story, and rightly so, around being out in nature and what all that means. But they're doing a great job. They're almost an international group. And I'll leave it at that. So, Michelle, somebody already got my other question. What's your favorite bug? But so you've been in the States for quite a while. Any plans on going back to the island?
So interestingly, I have now lived in the United States longer than I've lived in Trinidad. And I actually gained my US citizenship just last week.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was very, very happy about that.
Yeah, we want you here.
I would love to return to Trinidad in some sort of professional capacity, but I love working in the US. I think the opportunities here are just fantastic. And plus, I have to stay here to keep an eye on my sons as they return to college.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Fu, we promised to keep this at an hour. We're now 8 minutes past the hour. Are you okay with staying just a few more minutes for any other questions? So if anybody has questions, please give us just a second. I want to ask you a couple of questions. There's you were a 10-year leader at the International Association of Black Entomologists. So I had a question about if people wanted to support, do you want 10s or 20s, or what do you need there?
So I'm a 10-year member and a two-term former president. There's now a new president of the society. The website is blackentomologist.org, and I'll put it in the chat. And there's a donate button on that website if you would like to make a monetary contribution.
Okay. And do people come to you directly for hemp, or what? Is there a way for people to support your work there? And what can we do to help?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to ask my administration whether we can accept contributions. I'm not actually sure how that would work. But what has happened within my local community here, growers that are interested in learning about cannabis cultivation, industrial hemp cultivation, they have recognized my group and our work that we're doing as a resource. And it's just fantastic, particularly young growers or first-time growers of color. Mm-hmm. They feel comfortable coming, and I have no problem redirecting them to the extension service or to the other individuals that have more resources and making that connection. It's an interesting role that we're serving.
Okay, great.
Eddie, I have one more question, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. And then we're going to open it up for others.
I forgot to mention that I'm with Concerned Parents Alliance College for Hope. We have also host this event. So just being a parent now and understanding with your parents who are now gone, but they obviously instilled something in you. What advice would you give to parents, in particular for Black students who sometimes are not geared towards STEM. They start thinking early on, I'm not good in math, science is not a good field for me. What advice would you give to parents to help their children to become at least more exposed to the STEM field?
I think you hit on the key word, exposure. I think that it's really important that if you see a field day being offered, a museum day, an opportunity for a STEM academy engagement with your local university, that you take your children to that so that they see that it's not just sitting in a classroom and crunching numbers or memorizing facts. You don't just have to memorize the Krebs cycle of photosynthesis, all those dreary facts, which sometimes they can be dreary, but they get to meet real practitioners in the field, and that might spark an interest that maybe was dormant in their student. Positive, regular exposure, I think, is key. I try to read often with of my three sons, there are three different personalities. My two oldest are, they're very academically oriented, and they do their work even as virtual students now religiously with very little checkup from me needed. But my youngest, he needs me to be right there neck to neck with him, sitting with him, making sure he gets the work done. And that's a difference that I've recognized. And sometimes he's like, Mom, why are you in my Zoom? But I'm there checking up on him because I recognize that he needs this extra guidance, or he needs the extra push, because not every child is going to gravitate towards STEM. And it's our role as parents to not give up and to continuously encourage.
Thank you, Darlene. Are there any other questions for Dr. Foo? Let's go quickly. Okay, looks like that's the end of the questions. I want to thank you again, Dr. Foo, for your presentation, for your energy, and for your inspiration. We all benefited from it. Let's see, I think that's all we had, so we're just going to go ahead and close. Did you want to have any final remarks?
I just want to say thank you again. This was such a wonderful and amazing opportunity for me. I'm happy to be able to showcase my story, and I hope that it inspires even one or two young people to know that it doesn't matter what your origins, what your background, but just surround yourself with positive people, and you never know what opportunities can come your way. Success is not out of reach for you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being a bright star.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everybody.
Enjoyed it. Good job, Dr.
Great job.
Thank you.